their children, we can do no less. They had so little education, but they were brave. Now, if we would sit back and do less than they did, it would be a disservice to them and to their memory. So I guess that's what drives me when I'm speaking out about things. You know, I sometimes have the reputation of being too vocal, but I said, so what? What do I have to lose? Mm-hmm. If you don't make some noise sometimes and rattle a few chains, you will not get what you should have.
So when you were rattling those chains, when you were walking with the sandwich boards, did people spit on you or hit you or anything?
Fortunately, no. They did call us names, but we were not subjected to any physical abuse. Fortunately, you know, there were times when we were going to school. Sometime walking to school, elementary school, the school bus would pass us full of white kids. And they would spit on us.
Call you names?
Oh yes, oh yes. I mean, that was. Sometime walking through their neighborhoods, there was one way we could go to the bus to catch the bus, and we had to go through either the black neighborhood or the white neighborhood. So the shortest distance was through the white neighborhood. Sometimes they would either put their dogs on us or they'd run us.
And you're just trying to get to school.
We would sometimes try to go catch the bus to, you know, if we were going downtown or something. Okay. But if they saw us, you know, you had to be on the lookout all the time.
Wow.
You had to be on the lookout all the time.
So you talked too about the faculty members at Virginia State. How were they accepting of what you all were doing, or were they kind of distant? Were they fearful of their jobs, or?
I'm sure the faculty members were fearful. This one gentleman I told you I worked with in the data processing center, he was the only one who really was vocal. But the faculty, no, they never really said anything to us. Other than the one incident where the faculty member called some of the students jailbirds. But I'm sure they were proud of us, but out of fear for their positions, mm-hmm. they had to, you know, keep a low profile.
So how did you get to Prince William County?
I met my husband at Fort Lee.
Okay.
And he was deployed to Okinawa. No, he left the area. He went to Chicago and from there to Okinawa. And
what branch of service was he?
He was in the Army. And he was a Virginia State grad. He's a Virginia State grad also in the ROTC program. Excuse me. I left Fort Lee when he went to Chicago. I decided, I need a change of venue. So I left Fort Lee and came to this area, worked at Andrews Air Force Base. Well, before he went to Vietnam, we got married, and I stayed in that area working at Andrews. But after we got married, and then once his tour was over in Vietnam, he was stationed at Fort Belvoir. And we looked for housing, and that's how we ended up in Prince William County.
So what was it like looking for housing in Prince William County?
At the time we were looking, it was not bad.
So what year was this?
This was, we bought our first house here in 1970.
Okay.
We had friends, of course, who said they encountered a few problems. You know, they had bought housing prior to 1970, but we had no problem finding a house. And we didn't live in it right away because we knew that my husband would have another probably another overseas assignment. So we bought it, and we rented it and didn't live in it really until 1974 when he retired from the military.
How were race relationships when you came here to the county?
Not bad. I mean, sometimes you would hear little grumblings and mumblings, but nothing really serious. I remember when our older daughter, was in, I think it was kindergarten, first grade of kindergarten. She came home one day, she was very upset because her teacher, one of her white teachers who grew up in Mississippi, said she wanted Erica to say yes ma'am and no ma'am to her. We always taught our children to be respectful, and saying yes or no was okay. In fact, my dad always say yes or no to me. You know, it was no big deal. So my husband and I decided to have a little conference with the teacher, and she said, well, when I grew up in Mississippi, I was always taught to say yes ma'am and no ma'am. So we kind of chuckled. We said, you know, you can say yes ma'am and no ma'am in a very disrespectful way. However, we have taught our children to respect everybody and say yes and no. So if you would just stick with the academics, we will stick with the social graces. No more problems. And I mean, we just taught our children to just stand up for what you believe, but be respectful, but also respect yourself. And that's the way, sometimes I look at our two daughters, they are 42 and 44, and I'm thinking, oh my God, where did they get those attributes?
Do you ever talk to your daughters about your activism and the protests that you were involved in?
Some, but not a lot. You know, I guess because, in fact, they were kind of surprised when I told them a few years ago that I just never thought about it, that I was one of the protesters. They said, you? I said, yes. I was sort of a maverick at that time. But we try not to concentrate on that aspect of our lives, you know. But they know. They know that we were active, and they're proud of it.
Good.
Yeah.
So what do you think your legacy is?
That's interesting because, of course, my brothers and sisters and I are trying to live out the legacy of our parents, and so in turn we are hoping that that is an extension of their legacy to us, and that our daughters, even though they're grown, will continue to understand that whatever has happened and continues to happen, that we are making history all the time, and you're always being watched, and that they would just continue to do what is right and believe in themselves.
Yeah. If you had an opportunity to speak with Congressman Connolly and tell him why this project is so important, what would you say? Do you feel it's important?
It is extremely important. And I think I would say to Congressman Connolly or to any person that it's very important that we remember the past. Because if we don't remember the past, we are doomed to repeat it. And it's important that this message is there, this information is there for people to understand and to build on. And I thank him and anyone else who's involved in this, because it is very important that this story gets told. Our stories are told.
Mm-hmm.
Because too often we take too much for granted. I mean, I just cannot imagine what it must have been like during slavery. And when I read about some of the things that happened during that time, I'm just amazed at the bravery of people like Sojourner Truth, Frederick Douglass, and I mean all of the others that went before us. So what the congressman is doing is a great thing, and we need to keep the story told.
You know, going back to slavery, one of the things that the enslaved community wanted right after emancipation and Reconstruction was the ability to become educated and to vote. So did your parents, did they vote? Did they have problems with voting? Do you remember any of that?
My parents were very active in voting. That was one of the things that, again, my dad was ahead of his time. And there was a poll tax that had to be paid. But regardless, I think it was $1.50 or something like that. And that was a lot of money during that time. But my dad never missed an election. And my mother. They voted, and they said, look, if you don't vote, you don't have a voice. In fact, he would say to some of his friends who were complaining all the time, you have to voice your opinion. You might not think it means anything, but you've got to vote. It's very important. So, of course, I could hardly wait to, at the time I had to be 21 to vote.